Tonight on Reporting Scotland, an inquiry into the grounding of an oil rig on Lewis finds that the company towing it wasn't prepared for storms. The First Minister says she's open-minded about whether or not to increase income tax. The opposition claims she's softening Scotland up for a tax hike. The secondary school qualification that critics fear is worthless. Now most teachers are calling for a National Fours exam. The growing problem of people with dementia going missing. Police pilot a scheme aimed at finding them more quickly.
Is that a good thing?
Oh yes.
Why is it a good thing, Ted?
Well, it is, because people can run away. Not that I want to.
And later in the programme...
Come on, I'll give you a haunty load them in.
30 years after it was first performed, the Steamies back on the road with a national tour. Good evening. An investigation into the grounding of an oil rig on Lewis has found there was no contingency plan for bad weather. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has insisted she's open-minded over whether to increase income tax in Scotland. She said public spending would be balanced against business worries and other factors. But in sharp exchanges at Holyrood, the Tories claimed she was softening Scotland up for a tax hike. This from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
Funny thing, power. This is Holyrood's silver mace, symbol of parliamentary authority. But doesn't real power lie here with the First Minister? Up to a point, yes. But Nicola Sturgeon lacks a Holyrood majority. She can't simply get her way on spending and tax.
Question number one, Ruth Davidson.
Ruth Davidson reminded the First Minister of an SNP promise.
I am opposed to all current basic rate taxpayers paying more in income tax. Can the First Minister just confirm that she is too?
The SNP did indeed pledge to freeze the basic rate of income tax for the duration of this Parliament. But
usually when you open a debate and commit to listening to what others have to say, it makes sense to carry on and do that before ruling things out in advance.
Wealthier Scots already pay a little bit more than south of the border. That's because a Treasury tax cut wasn't matched by Holyrood. But Scottish ministers rejected Labour demands for a 50p upper rate, fearing avoidance would actually cut revenue. Nicola Sturgeon now plans a discussion paper looking at all elements of tax. She knows business is fretting.
But our businesses need investment as well. They need investment in health, in education, in skills, in infrastructure. All of that has to be paid for.
Jacking up taxes on working families and businesses in Scotland will damage the government's stated objective of getting the economy growing faster and of bringing in more revenue.
Labour's in a power struggle of its own, but their interim leader backed public spending bolstered by tax.
Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, Labour has been calling for and will very much welcome such a debate on how we invest in Scotland's future moving forward, because we cannot continue with failed Tory austerity.
MSPs will get that discussion paper in the autumn before the bargaining begins over next year's Holyrood budget. Power. Balanced power.
And Brian joins me now. Where exactly does this leave us on tax, Brian? Are we any the wiser?
Let's remember, Sally, that it's Holyrood that determines all income tax rates and bans for Scotland these days. Scottish ministers felt that the debate last year, in the run-up to last year's budget, was a bit unstructured, a bit uncertain, not particularly securely grounded, hence this discussion paper. What they want to do basically is pin down the consequences of various proposals for taxation. They will include in that discussion paper the proposals as advanced by the opposition parties to try and set a firm basis for the arguments which will now take place for the forthcoming year on taxation. Let me say one thing on the subject of the basic rate of tax. Nicola Sturgeon, as you heard there, did not rule out a change to that. I would be very, very surprised indeed if the Scottish Government and Nicola Sturgeon went down that road. It was a key manifesto pledge, and also politically it works for them and enables them to claim that there are Tory cuts and to say that Labour would seek to pass on the cost of those cuts to relatively modest earners in Scotland. So they'll be looking at other aspects, perhaps the bans, perhaps the upper rates, but there'll be this discussion taking place which ministers hope will be based upon evidence rather than based upon argument and rhetoric.
Brian Taylor, Holyrood, thank you very much. Police are investigating the sudden death of a 9-year-old girl in Glasgow. Police and ambulance services attended a house in Dumbreck Road just before 2 o'clock this afternoon. Most teachers want a big change to one of the qualifications that replace standard grades. According to the Qualifications Agency, the SQA, they'd like to see some sort of exam in National 4 courses, which are currently based on coursework and teacher assessment. Some critics fear the qualification is seen as worthless. Here's our education correspondent, Jamie McIver.
Go and do that. Write the two equations out again.
Brandon is surprising himself with his progress. Maths was never his best subject, but he still got his National 4 last year.
You were right the first time. Good, good, yeah.
And now he's working for a more advanced qualification, the National 5.
Had you not done the National 4 maths last year, would you be doing National 5 maths this year?
No, because I probably find it really hard to understand where they're coming from with the maths, stuff like the formulas and just the work in it in general.
The emphasis in schools now is on what qualifications a youngster has by the time they leave, not what they've achieved by the end of a particular year.
But the National 4 has faced some serious criticism. Some claim it's seen as worthless because there's no exam. SQA research suggests most teachers now want an exam of some sort, and many teachers claim they've faced pressure to put youngsters forward for National 5s instead.
We need to reform it because the National 4 in itself is a good qualification. The problem is how it's perceived by the public outside and employers. They don't regard it as being very valuable, and that therefore rebounds back onto the pupils themselves.
The government says any changes would need careful consideration first.
Whilst people might suggest that an exam is the answer to strengthening National 4, there is divided opinion about that, and we have to be careful if we undertake any reform of such a type that we bear in mind the original purpose of National 4, which was to recognise the learning of a particular group of young people.
Go for it.
Brandon is aiming for university, but for some youngsters a National 4 is an end in itself, and that's one reason why many teachers want to ensure it's seen as a valued qualification. Jamie McIver, reporting Scotland.
It's thought that up to half of people with dementia will go missing at some point in their illness. Implementing equal pay for women and men still remains a challenge for local government. That's according to the Accounts Commission, who say that this time last year, almost 27,000 claims were still outstanding. Katrina Renton's here with more.
Thank you, Sally. For Scottish councils, it was in 1999 that a process called the Single Status Agreement was introduced to ensure equal pay for male and female local authority employees. The original deadline to ensure equal pay was 2004, but that was missed by 31 out of 32 councils. Since then, the Accounts Commission has reported there have been over 70,000 claims to remedy this by employees of local authorities across the country at a cost of £750 million. But as of September last year, there were still nearly 27,000 outstanding, 18 years since the process began. Some of those claims have since been settled. I went to meet a carer who has taken a claim against Glasgow City Council, which owns the care company she works for.
Getting service users from bed.
Shona Thompson has been working as a carer for 17 years.
Mostly it is elderly people, but people that have also went through surgery and they're recuperating and just trying to gain their independence back.
She has a claim against Glasgow City Council. She believes she's not paid as much as men doing equivalent jobs.
It makes you feel undervalued, and we just want to all be on the same level and have the same, be treated just the same, so that there's the same grading structure for everybody and we're all equal.
At the heart of many claims are productivity bonuses.
The problem was those bonuses were only being paid to male-dominated jobs such as road sweepers, refuse collectors and road workers, but not to female-dominated jobs like home carers, school cooks, cleaners, classroom assistants. And that's why this grew up with the different jobs being considered to be equivalent to each other, but being paid differently.
Today's report from the Accounts Commission gives an idea of the scale of how widespread the issue has been.
Looking forward, we say that councils must be confident that they embed equal pay in all their operations, that council officers must carry out their duties in regard to equal pay and report in public, and that elected councillors use their powers of scrutiny and challenge to question progress on equal pay.
Shona says all she wants is to feel that her work is valued as much as men. According to the report, Glasgow City Council has had the most claims lodged against it, over 22,000, although it is likely some people have claimed more than once. The leader of the local authority, Susan Aitken, said the council was elected on a commitment to improve industrial relations, including resolving inherited outstanding equal pay cases. They say they've already made progress over the summer. But today's report warns there could potentially be more claims to come. Sally.
Thanks very much, Katrina. Scotland's Brexit minister has accused the UK government of acting as if devolution never happened. Michael Russell was speaking ahead of a debate at Westminster. The Scottish Secretary, David Mundell, has denied claims that the bill to repatriate laws from Europe could see a power grab by the UK government. Here's our Westminster correspondent, David Porter.
At Westminster, the scaffolding is up, protecting Big Ben as the world's most famous clock gets a long overdue makeover. Some say Brexit offers the constitutional equivalent to the UK as a whole, a chance to repair and renew. But like the work on Big Ben, it'll be painstaking and complicated.
Secretary David Davis.
Today, a key stage in turning Brexit policy into practice.
We expect a significant increase in the decision-making power of the devolved institutions.
From ministers, reassuring words, but in Holyrood and Westminster, accusations that the UK government wants to turn the clock back.
It is, outrageous that a paper can be published on civil law without even a consultation with the Scottish government or the Lord Advocate. It almost defies belief that such a thing would happen.
This is just a power grab, pure and simple, by Theresa May. She's wanting to take control of the whole Brexit procedure and control it all centrally by herself and civil servants and ministers in Downing Street. Simply, that is not good enough.
Not so, says the Scottish Secretary.
It's absolutely incredible to suggest that at a time when we're devolving income tax, huge tranches of the welfare system, somehow the UK government would be wanting to micromanage hill farming. That's nonsense.
Like the Nationalists and the Liberal Democrats, Labour will vote against the plans.
But Clause 11 prevents that and diverts powers which ought to go to Edinburgh, Cardiff or Belfast to London, where they're to be hoarded. Fundamentally the wrong approach, but totally consistent with the government approach of grabbing power and avoiding scrutiny.
Like the hands of Big Ben, some think it's hard to see any discernible movement on Brexit as a whole. Getting there is going to be a time-consuming business. David Porter, reporting Scotland, Westminster.
A community group in Edinburgh has become the first urban organisation to benefit from community right to buy powers. Scottish employers have been urged to increase the number of jobs with flexible working conditions. The report says this would enable companies to attract more and better applicants. Our social affairs correspondent, Reval Alderson, has more.
A mother plays with her toddler. Diana Halvey is an experienced digital marketing expert designing websites. But because she wants to spend time with Ola, she wants to work flexibly. But that means she can't find the job she'd like and for which she's qualified.
I've had jobs where I've been offered the job. When I've brought up flexibility, I've just been told, absolutely not, you need to be in the office 5 days a week. As a mother, if someone was able to give me that flexibility, I value that so much that I would be incredibly loyal, I'd be so hardworking, I'd go above and beyond for that company.
She's not alone. Research commissioned by the Scottish Government suggests a third of unemployed Scots are seeking part-time or flexible work, but less than 12% of jobs advertised offer that. When flexible conditions were offered, pay was typically £3.62 an hour less than for full-time workers with similar qualifications. Businesses are now being offered help to increase their workforce flexibility to prevent them missing out on the best available talent.
There's a real business benefit to employers of offering flexible working conditions to employees. We find through our work that employees are more productive, more resilient, more loyal to businesses when there's an element of flexibility built into their role, and that's great for business and it's great for individuals.
At Lloyd's Banking Group in Edinburgh, which already promotes flexible working, the Equality Secretary launched the report. She says it's an important part of the government's Fairer Scotland Action Plan.
Increasing flexible work opportunities helps us tackle things like the pay gap, and getting more people into the labour market is ultimately beneficial for our economy. So flexible working isn't just the right thing to do, it's actually the smart thing to do.
Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, sang Dolly Parton. By the time little Ola grows up, that sort of working day may be a thing of the past. Reeve Alderson reporting Scotland.
The Steamie was written by actor Tony Roper in just 10 days, a tribute to the women who used the public washhouses in Scotland in the 1950s. Some news just in. The Scottish Football Association has written to clubs advising them there will be no review of football's handling of Rangers' EBT tax controversy. Timeline is back on BBC Two at 7:30 tonight. Glenn and Shireen can tell us what's coming up. Quick reminder of tonight's main news. Hurricane Irma has destroyed almost everything in its path as it sweeps across the eastern Caribbean. It's now heading northwest towards Cuba and Florida. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. Until then, have a good evening. Bye-bye.